right, everybody. This is the inaugural session for the feed. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Woo! All right. So we're going to be joined. I'm going to be joined on the stage for the next little while by four amazing guests. My first guest, Daniel Debow. Daniel, welcome to the feed.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
First ever guest on the podcast. I couldn't think of anybody better to start with.
Oh, wow.
So you've got a life that's been living at the intersection of technology and understanding consumers and understanding innovative business models. Now, that just didn't come to you. You didn't exactly start with a lemonade stand, but your entrepreneur career started pretty early. Walk us a bit through your background and what you do for a living.
Sure. So my entrepreneurial journey started when I wanted to organize rock concerts for my friends to see shows in high school. And so I got excited about building things that other people got involved in and did things. My first real entrepreneurial venture was a startup called WorkBrain. A fellow named David Ossip, who's an amazing Canadian entrepreneur, asked me if I would help join the team, help him write the business plan. That little startup turned into a large public company, which we grew and sold, and it sold actually workforce management. Retail was the number one customer. Target, Walmart, Best Buy, Walmart all used the software that WorkBrain created. After that, I co-founded another company with one of the WorkBrain founders called Ripple. And that was like next generation HR software. We sold that to Salesforce. I worked there for a while. And then I started a company called Helpful and worked on that for a little while. And we sold that to Shopify. I worked at Shopify for the past 6 years. I left in January. Yeah. And then along the way, I've done a bunch of other things, including being on the board of Loblaw, helping to start the Creative Destruction Lab at the University of Toronto, investing in dozens and dozens of Canadian companies, which has been a great journey. And then also in the sort of physical world, I have a bunch of interest in music. And so I've been part of some not-for-profits and for-profit businesses that have grown around my passion for music.
What a diverse, interesting background. You know, we're living at this really interesting moment as Canadians, as the world right now.
Yep.
What is I know you're doing a lot of different efforts as you kind of spread yourself and apply those amazing skills. How are you thinking about the time we're living through and how to best take advantage of where we are today as Canadians?
I think it is one of the most interesting times ever in the history of humanity, right? We're on the cusp of another massive technologically driven shift, probably going to be on par with the Industrial Revolution. And that's a pretty exciting time to be around. I know that the dominant vibe is always negative because we are saturated with negative stories. That's, I think, partially a structural issue about media, but also literally a structural thing about our brains. Like, we just are evolved to respond to negative information. What? There's a tiger over there? Like, let me go pay attention to that, right? And so
that's interesting.
And so I think we are really we see it, and this is how people respond to social media content. And there's a saying in news media: if it bleeds, it leads. That's true today too, right? So people will be triggered by negative content, but that puts us in a cycle of believing that everything is worse, everything is getting worse. If you take a step back and you are open about the data and you look at a longer time frame, you see that things are getting much, much better. There are less people who are starving, less poor people, less people who don't have access to clean water or health. It doesn't mean that we don't have challenges as societies, but I do think the long trend is pretty positive. If you then layer on the fact that we're in a world where the average person today has essentially Star Trek capacity. They have a communicator device in their hand, which is a supercomputer. I mean, the average iPhone has just thousands and millions of times more power than the computers used to send the Saturn V to the moon. And we have this capacity connected to the cloud. We have all sorts of tools that people have. One thing to remember is a lot of what we consider to be the Industrial Revolution, which I talk about, is a relatively small number of people who were building that because the rest of the planet was just excluded from it. Now we live in a world where people all over the world can create and build the future for all of us. So I think that's why I get up every day pretty excited about it, despite the headlines.
Well, it's interesting because you make me think of that saying, the future is here, it's just not distributed evenly.
Yes.
So I guess that's got to be a big part.
William Gibson said that.
Right, great Canadian author. It's got to be, I think, in your mind about how do we make sure that not just you and me and the people in this room, but everybody has access to those life-changing and life-enhancing technologies, right? Is that kind of opportunity, right?
I think it's a great question. I mean, I believe that we have a pretty good system for distributing those products. It's called capitalism. It actually works pretty well. I remember wandering in as a kid into downtown. There was a radio store and seeing my first flat screen TV, and it was $16,000. I remember I was like, what? Who's going to spend that on TV? I think it was like maybe 35 inches.
Yeah.
Okay, you can buy an 80-inch flat screen TV for under $1,000 in many places around the world right now.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to have a little more faith in what's got us here. It doesn't mean we can't be critical of it. It doesn't mean we can't improve it. It doesn't mean that there's not yet a new synthesis and a new approach going forward. But I think we also shouldn't be so skeptical that we've actually been able to lift billions of people out of poverty, billions out of dire straits, and have actually been able in a Western society provide products and services that are miraculous. Like the one thing I'll leave you before we go to our next chat, the average worker today comes out of, well, let me take a step back. I was just in France with my kids and we went to Versailles, and there's a famous story that in Versailles, Louis, I think the 15th, would have, 100 chefs cook all sorts of different meals, French meal, British meal, Germanic, what was it? All these different dishes, and he would sort of wander through and decide what he was going to eat. This was the food of a king. Only the king could have that. Everybody else was not eating that. But today, the average person who gets off a subway in downtown Toronto or in Edmonton has literally dozens of choices of places that they can eat prepared food that's actually healthy and is safe, not going to harm them. And we forget that's literally what it took an emperor to have that ability. And so, again,
I think about the same
I just
thing
think
in terms of,
we're on our way. We do a lot, and it's okay. People always want more, right? They want more, and that's a good thing. That's what makes the system work.
I think of the same thing when I think about, time compression. Since the beginning of my career, it's the time-stressed consumer. But so much of what we did 20 years ago is now automated. It's in our hands. Like some of it is like the pace of the change. So let's talk about pace of change, pace of disruption.
Yeah.
So I want to tap into, you in your description, you've scaled companies and sold them. That's not an easy thing to do during disruptive times.
No.
Great Canadian company, Shopify, right? Really as what, I don't know if we call it a unicorn or whatever we want to call it, but through disruptive times, they've built a business model that can keep pace. What's your advice? You're on the board of Loblaw. You're thinking about this. You've gone through a couple of revs of this. What's your advice, and how do you think about coping with disruption, not being driven by it, but somehow leveraging the disruption itself to drive your business model?
Yeah, I think Shopify's centacorn now. It's over $100 billion. It's pretty amazing. The second most valuable company in the country. Look, I have been lucky enough to work with all sorts of folks who have been on the receiving ends of this technology. I think the first one is you would rather be there welcoming people to the party that you figured out how it works than being the person showing up to a very crowded room and having someone tell you how things work. And so what does that mean? It means when these things are coming, we can't be fearful of them. We have to try them, put our fingers on them, build with them, and experiment. You put a firewall around it. You don't flip over the entire factory or entire system right away. The point I guess I'm trying to make is in times of disruption, it is far better to be a disruptor or to be able to use the tools of disruption to disrupt your own business, because if you don't, someone will do it for you. That's a certainty. Someone out there will figure out another tool, another product, another way of doing it faster, better, cheaper, and they will win. And so I feel like rather than have that being done to you, you really want to be ahead, leaned into doing it. And as a practical matter, I don't think it takes, in regular companies that aren't filled with techies, I don't think it takes, we have to set up a special team or we have to just break everything. I think it takes trying things, right? Being open. We were just chatting earlier about AI. These tools are accessible, right? You can put them on your desktop. You can start playing with them. And
they remind me of Shopify. Like when I first started in e-commerce at Hudson's Bay, 2000. It was $1 million to take a credit card. Right. And the technology was the barrier in addition to the business model. Now it's a great leveling of the playing field. So, as a company of one have access to these amazing technologies, and I think it's that leveling of the playing field, right?
It is. Well, so I think two unrelated thoughts. Here we are sitting having a podcast. Podcasts themselves as a medium, like what did you need to do this? Well, you need to own a radio station, right? You need to go in. Or we're talking about music, like record labels used to own record plants. That's what they did because you needed to have a recording studio.
Right.
Now people can do that at their home. And so that's a great opportunity for more creativity, more things to get created. We should be thinking about, well, how can I do that in my own plant, but also know someone's going to do that to you. I think the second thing about this coming into production environments is you don't have to do big bang things. You can make incremental improvements along the way. Think about the process of applying these technologies more like sandpaper and less like, building a new foundation for your house, right? What I mean by that is you're just sanding away the friction. Hey, can we make this process 10 minutes faster? Can we take the one person who we have who does this step and reconciles these two emails? Can we just make that an AI agent that does that and then they can go do something else? I think actually people who are in manufacturing and do it well, any sort of continuous flow production, they're very familiar with lean and the concept of continuous improvement, the concepts of Kaizen.
I was going to say
and
Kaizen, right?
That's about every week. And I think if you do it well, it's really about the Kaizen circle is the team on the floor who's building the thing. And so it's about trusting people who build the thing to know how to improve the thing. Okay, I feel like that same logic can be applied to these tools. How can you just find incrementally small improvements? 1% improvement every week compounds to a massive improvement over a 52-week cycle. And so instead of looking for giant home runs and re-engineering and refactoring, think about sandpaper. Think about removing friction, removing things that people don't know how to do. Now, if you're wedded to the friction, that's the way we always do it. If we can't change that because that's Sally's job. She's done that for 20 years, and I know we could get an agent to do that. That's where I think, there have to be sensitivity. But I also think that's when you're at risk of being disrupted because you're not willing to make small, continuous changes to improve and be ready for what's about to come.
Well, fantastic lessons for everyone. And thanks so much for joining me, Daniel. It was a real treat.
Good luck with the new pod. I hope it goes well.
Thanks. Well, we're off to a great start, so thank you.
No problem. Pleasure.
All right, that's it. Let's hear it for Daniel.